Hi everyone, my name's Ayush. Today we're hosting another webcast on Stack Views. Just a little introduction about myself. I'm a course manager on the iOS team here at Udacity, and the topic today is pretty heavily requested, and we hope it will really help solve a lot of the problems that you guys have been having. So, without further ado, let's get into it. One of the things to keep in mind, though, before we start, it is that this webcast rather, is not going to be fully exhaustive. So we aren't going to cover every single technical attribute about stack views, but really explore how to get started with using stack views, and then you can kind of build on from there. Um, so with stack views, we have a few main things to keep in mind. And I believe I have changed the way that works. Okay, so stack views have a few main properties that we have to keep in mind. The first is axis. So there are two types of stack views. We have a horizontal and we have a vertical stack view. And what this basically means is in a horizontal stack view, whenever you add elements to it, it kind of adds them in a left to right type of manner. In a vertical stack view, you add them top to bottom. This will play a pretty big role, and we'll talk about that as we go through some of the examples that we're going to cover in this webcast. So the next property that we need to keep in mind is alignment. So alignment differs between horizontal and vertical stack views. And in the horizontal stack views, there are four main types. So top, center, bottom, and baseline. Top, center, and bottom are pretty straightforward, but baseline essentially assigns the baseline of all of the text in the stack view to the bottom of the stack view. Then next, we have the vertical alignment. So fill will essentially stretch all of the elements in the stack view to kind of take over the entire space available in the stack view. And then leading, center, and trailing kind of do what the name implies. Lastly, the last property that we need to be aware of is distribution. And distribution is a little bit more complicated, and we'll kind of walk through some of the demos to explore what this does. In distribution, we have fill, which stretches all of the elements to kind of take advantage of all the space in the stack view. We have fill equally, which means that all of the elements in the stack view have the same size. Fill proportionally assigns different sizes based on the contents of the elements, and then equal spacing essentially assigns an equal amount of spacing between all of the elements to make them look nice. Okay, so for our first example, what we're going to do is we're going to go on a website called Patterns. Patterns is a website which lets you explore some of the greatest app designs. And one of the app designs that I thought could really use a stack view is this app, the screen on an app called Canopy. So one of the things that we can see here is we have a lot of small buttons, and it would be really difficult to assign all of the constraints in a normal auto layout kind of fashion. So what we'll do is we'll hop into our Xcode project, and here I've kind of set everything up already. This Xcode project is actually going to be available in the description of this webcast. The full completed version is. And we're going to start out by doing a few things. So one of the things here is if we just start running this off the bat, I haven't added any constraints, so it's just what it looks like now. You'll see the app pop up, and of course, it's not how we want it to look. So let's get started by assigning a few stack views. One of the stack views we can see immediately is these buttons down here, which are aligned left to right. So we'll put them in a horizontal stack view, and you can do that by clicking on the elements that you want, and then click on this button right here, which says stack. Okay, so I'll click on that, and it automatically determines that these elements should probably be in a horizontal stack view instead of a vertical. The next things that we might want stacked are the item name and kind of like the company that kind of owns it. So we'll stack these, and we're only stacking these because we want it to have a slightly different spacing. As you can see in the example, that the spacing between the area alarm clock dock and 82 likes might be a little different than some of the other spacings. So we'll stack these separately, and then finally we'll put all of these elements, and yes, you can embed a stack view inside of another stack view. We'll combine them all together, and bam, we have our example. So when you run this, you'll notice that, well, now it just looks worse, right? Everything's kind of offset. One of the things that we need to be aware of is we might need to assign constraints to our big stack view. And so essentially what we're going to do is we're just going to say that we want this 0 pixels from the left, 0 pixels from the right, and then we want it to be 0 pixels from the right side. And that way, all of these contents are going to be aligned towards like the top and fulfill the entire screen. Okay, so we'll do that right now. And then we'll kind of drag it back to make it look as it would if the app was running. And finally, we'll add a little bit more spacing. I like the elements close together, but if we separate them out a little bit, it might look a little nicer. We'll add some spacing in this stack view as well, where we'll say, oh, the spacing might be 12 pixels here. And then finally, we'll separate out some of these buttons. So we'll click on the stack view, and we'll say, okay, we want a spacing of 24. Okay. So now it looks slightly better, but one of the things we also want to do is make sure this button takes up the entire width of the screen. So what we can also do is assign constraints inside of a stack view if we really want to. Again, this isn't necessary, but we can do that if we need to. Apologies, we can't see the stack button you clicked. All right, let's make sure this is all working as we intended. I hope it works now. Sorry about that issue. Is that better? Sorry, there's a little bit of a delay between the stream and what I see. Okay, sweet. Sorry about that. Hopefully this works a little bit better. But now, as you can see when we run the app, it looks far better. And one of the other things you'll notice is that this text field right here, which says Udacity's iOS nanodegree, come learn how to create an iOS app with us, is actually taking up 2 lines. So that's another cool thing about stack views. Because it automatically assigns these auto layout constraints, we can have multiple lines in a text field, or we can have just one line. So if we delete this come learn how to create an iOS app with us, it might just be one line, and you'll notice that all of the elements in our built app look good. And yeah, sorry, since I did miss how to create the actual stack view in the first place, what you can do is you can select 2 elements, any 2 elements on the screen, and click this button right here. I'm hovering over it with my cursor. The button essentially says stack, and it's directly to the left of the align and pin menus on the bottom side of your screen. Okay, so now that we have that built, that's just one quick example of how you can use stack views. Another really cool thing about stack views is that it's really easy to modify it. So, for example, if we wanted to add another label, which said something else, right, and we'll put this right between or right under our Udacity name, and we'll call this, or we'll say something else here. We'll say Webcast Rock. Okay. So suppose we want that label. If we were just using auto layout constraints, it would be incredibly difficult to kind of rework all of this and figure out how to change the constraints so we can incorporate this label. But with stack views, all we have to do is just drag the label there, and bam, once you run it, you'll notice that it works. It just works straight away, and it's super easy to do. So just in a nutshell, that's how simple stack views are to use, and I would highly recommend using these. I would highly recommend using these in your apps. Huh. Apologies for all of these issues with video. I hope it pops up on screen again. But basically, the idea with stack views is they're easily modifiable, right? So you can just add more labels or more buttons. So if you add more labels right here, suppose we add another label under Webcast Rock, and we'll call this try again, Ayush. Okay, and then we run this. So you'll see, I didn't save the text in the label. But anyways, you can see that the label appears, and it's super easy to modify. You don't have to recreate all the constraints again. The stack view kind of takes care of all of these for us. Another really cool thing is stack views also work across multiple size classes. So if you wanted to, we could rotate the device left, and you'll see that the stack view kind of arranges itself to fill the screen. Okay, so another thing with stack views, and this might be a more advanced topic, so we aren't going to entirely cover it in this video, is if you look in the attributes inspector, you'll see these little plus symbols next to a lot of these categories up top. So for example, with axis, if you want to change what direction the stack view flows in, if you want to change what direction the stack view flows in, you can simply press the plus button right here and just choose a different size class. Okay, so that's stack views in a nutshell, and apologies for the screen problems again. Hopefully this gets fixed for the last time here. So just coming back to it, we can use stack views in a lot of different applications. For example, here is a screenshot from one of the events tabs in Facebook's app. So you can use stack views to arrange all of the labels on the screen, and that would make it really easy. So for example, if we were to break this app up, there would be one big stack view encompassing everything. Then we would have a vertical stack, or sorry, a horizontal stack view here, which contains multiple other stack views. One might be for the date, one might be for the event name, the number of people that are interested, and then finally we can add that last button to the right. So before we end this kind of webcast, I want to mention that it's a great idea to go to the WWDC 2015 videos. I've added the link to this in the description of this webcast, and if you scroll further down, you'll hit two different videos. One is called Mysteries of Auto Layout Part 1, and the other is Part 2. Both of these videos start to cover stack view, and then they go into really great depth. So these are great videos to watch if you want to learn how to do some more advanced things with your stack views. So before we end, I'd love to answer any questions you might have. If there are any really pertinent parts of the webcast that the screen was out for, I'd love to go back and cover those now. Just let me know in the comments, and I'll make sure to see them. So start using stack views in some of your apps. If you could go over some common problems related to setting constraints, that would be helpful. They trip me up frequently. So constraints are really a really big problem. So let's go here to our Xcode window. So with constraints, we have a whole bunch of different issues, and we've tried to cover them in one of our past webcasts. You can simply go to the iOS Nanodegree events channel, and we have two different videos on constraints. So take a look there first. Constraints are usually just, you learn to do them as you play more with them, and that might sound a little off-putting, but they just take a lot of practice. you need to kind of maybe mentally prepare how you might want the constraints. So with the stack view, for instance, we wanted it to encompass the entire screen. So you can essentially pin it to different sides of the screen, and that way it will work. So another question is how to apply stack view to text field. Every time I apply stack to text field, it became so small. So yes, that might be one of the problems with stack views, but here I'll show you an example of how to do that. So you'll see that the text field becomes really small, but what you can do is you can add constraints inside the stack view. For example, I want the text field to be 0 pixels from the right side and the left side, and I want it to have a height of 30. So when I add the constraints, you'll see it stretches out, and it kind of takes advantage of the constraints that I put. So that's how you kind of override some of the problems with the stack view. Can you put a background image in stack view? As far as I know, I guess you could. You could technically set the background property to an image, but what might be a more reasonable way around this is to put the stack view on top of an image view. And then just have the same constraints for both the stack view and the image view, if that makes sense. So essentially the stack view in that case would overlay the image view, and the stack view would have a transparent background so you could see the image through it. Absolutely. So Jay Foster Davis says, if you could provide a link, that would be helpful. Why don't I just show you? So if you go on youtube.com, and what we'll do is we'll go to iOS nanodegree events, and we'll click on iOS nanodegree events, okay? And then we'll go to the video section. You'll see we have a webcast on auto layout here, and then we also have an auto layout demonstration as well as a webcast on constraints. So I would recommend checking out all of these different webcasts, and they'll kind of help you through the process. So before we wrap up, are there any other questions that you guys might have? Cool. So it looks like there are no more questions, but if you have any other questions, please feel free to post in the forums or the Slack channel, and we'll make sure to get an answer back to you. Hope this webcast helped, and apologies in advance for all of the issues that we had. And then before we end, we have a final question by Chris Chen, who asks, is it possible to put stack views inside a custom UI table view cell? And the answer is yes. So here's an example of how that might work. This is going back to that Facebook type of example. This is actually in a collection view cell. So it's very similar, but you can essentially assign a stack view to fulfill the entire width and height of a cell, and then put all the elements that you want in it. The thing I would pay attention to here is to set the height and the width of whatever cells you're using to accommodate the entire stack view so you can really take advantage of it. Great. So without further ado, let's end that. Hope you had a great time. Bye.